Welcome to Bulls, Bears, and Bill, a weekly Dalton community television program on the financial markets. Brought to you by Bill Schmick, founder of Onota Partners, and me, Rachel Branch, co-host. And when Bill says financial markets, he means all of them. On each program, we will continue to share with you, our audience, why the markets did what they did and where they are going in the weeks and months to come ahead. Bill writes 2 columns weekly for several media and newspaper organizations throughout the country. The substance of Bulls, Bears, and Bill.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's Monday. I did not write 2 columns last week because I took a mini vacation, leaving on Tuesday and coming back yesterday to Cape Cod, which was quite lovely. I deliberately did that, by the way, in thinking that the crowds would have left by the time I got there. I took a ferry ride over to Martha's Vineyard. No way. You couldn't fit another person on that ferry. So I was scratching my head. What is going on? And somebody reminded me that, some of us, what we'll do is instead of taking a vacation during the summer months, we wait till the crowds have left, the prices are cheaper, things like that. No, what the problem has become is climate change has made it warmer and warmer, so that the vacation period is now extended, and up there, they expect the crowds to be like they are until sometime in the end of October, and maybe into November. Anyway, lesson learned, you always learn something. But while I was away, the Federal Reserve meeting occurred, the Federal Open Markets Committee meeting. And as we talked, and as I expected, we had a 25 basis point cut in the Fed funds rate. That's a 1/4 point cut. But more importantly, the chairman, Jerome Powell, indicated that if things continued the way they are, that we could expect as many as 2 more 25 basis point cuts this year, and possibly one in the beginning of next year. Well, the markets, that's all they needed to hear, and markets were up, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Not today, they're pulled back a little bit, but we hit high after record high after record high. And it's really, if you think about it, if the Fed does do what they're saying, it's an ideal situation for the stock markets, because you'll have cuts in the interest rates. The economy isn't booming, but it's growing somewhere between 1.5% and 2%, which is acceptable. And if inflation continues on a more moderate path, we have a Goldilocks type economy, which could propel the markets higher between now and maybe October, November. That's not to say that we won't get some pullbacks in between, but the markets, they're extended, they're overbought, but markets can stay overextended and overbought longer than you can afford not to be in the market. So if you're in the market, stay in the markets, accept that you'll get some pullbacks, but overall, it seems to be, thanks to the Fed, a more bullish environment than it was a week and a half ago.
Do you think you ought to diversify a little bit? Or not yet?
Well, diversification, for example, as I've said, I have been bullish on precious metals since the beginning of the year, even before that. And I think gold and silver are hitting record highs and record highs day after day after day. In fact, they've both done much better than the stock markets. Mm-hmm. So there's diversification there. Emerging markets have also, that's another area I've really liked, they have also outperformed. They had a pullback last week, and they're what I call a dollar play. What do I mean? As the US dollar goes down, their currencies strengthen, and when they do, so do their stock markets. And as we know, the US dollar seems to be making low after low after low. And that's a function of the government, really. The government and the president has said, quite frankly, that they want a lower dollar. Why? Because in this situation where you have tariffs, as we put tariffs on goods that are coming in, okay, and there's a response from other countries that put tariffs on our goods that are going out, when you reduce the value of the dollar, you also reduce the cost of our exports overseas, see? So that declining dollar has also pushed up foreign markets, with the emerging markets leading. And then the final one is China, which has had a fantastic run. I think I've mentioned this before. It's outperformed the US market over the last 2 years and continues to go higher. And from what I can gather, reading the headlines and listening to our president and to the US Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, that the negotiations with China are they're continuing on schedule. There's no deal that's been done, but there certainly isn't any indication that we're going to do anything but continue to negotiate and not slap these 100% tariffs on China, as has been threatened in the past. I have to hand it to the Chinese, actually, because their strategy has been twofold and very successful. Number one, they saw it coming, meaning they saw additional tariffs which would hurt their exports to the United States. For the last 3 or 4 years, what they have been doing is pulling back exports into the US and redirecting those exports to other countries in Europe, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, wherever they could export. So by the time the tariffs hit, the amount of exports to the United States has been drastically reduced, to the point where I think I saw a number that the exports to the United States from China are worth less than 2.2% of their gross domestic product.
Wow.
Tiny, tiny. So on the other hand, the other step of the negotiations, notice that they continue to negotiate with us, say positive things to us, not retaliate that much against our tariffs, and continue to disagree. So what keeps happening is the US government keeps negotiating and keeps postponing the tariffs. Negotiate, postpone. Negotiate, postpone. It's a Chinese tactic that's worked wonderfully. It worked wonderfully back in 2018, 2019, and it's working once again. So what can I say? The Chinese are impressive, what they've done, and so has their stock market. So that kind of catches you up on the world in a blink of the eye.
I'm going to go to actually my third question today, because this is what appears to me, that the United States is on a rapid decline in its long-held top position in the economic affairs of the world. And I believe it is because of Trump's trade tariffs, and on-again, off-again declarations, as well as changes in dates and tariff percentages. To me, perception really matters. What are your reactions to this?
Well, I think that globally, the chessboard is changing. And up until this year, 2 years, 3 years ago, the chessboard said that we were first among equals. And as a result of that, being first among equals, we could be generous in helping out other countries that were less fortunate than us. It's basically a doctrine that we created back in post-World War II. What I think has changed, rather than a decline in the prospects for the United States, is we no longer care if we're first among equals. Why? Because the voters, the majority of voters, do not care that we're first among equals. What they want to see is that America is first. That is, that the people within the United States are the number one priority. And if that means that our standing, both politically and economic, throughout the world decline, so be it. And it kind of explains why there's a large portion of the country that, for example, has wanted us out of the Ukraine, or are against what Israel is doing in Gaza, so on and so on. There's been a pullback from that post-World War II philosophy. And since this administration began, this time around, it's been a rapid change, listening to what the voters had said, the majority of voters, not all voters, but the majority of them, and they seem to be approving in poll after poll of what's occurring. Now, what's the long-term impact of that? Well, the long-term impact will be that we may end up being not first among equals, but just another one of the equals.
Well, doesn't that pull us back historically to an isolationist position?
It does.
And in these times, of course, the fourth turning is now, globally, is that even possible? And,
if it's possible,
are there any possible and logical pullbacks to what is occurring?
Well, sure. We're already seeing them. There are both economic and political agendas, not in this country, but in other countries, based on what we're doing. So what we're beginning to see all over the world are new trade pacts excluding the United States. That, especially in the BRICS, the Brazil, India, China, what am I missing? Russia, okay?
North Korea.
Well, North Korea is a smaller country, but yes.
You're talking
yes.
about okay.
Economics. And so the BRICS have actually expanded from being 4 countries to something like 18 countries, very quietly. But that trade pact is growing and growing and growing. What will that do to us in the United States in the years ahead? Well, it's got to weaken us. It's got to weaken our negotiating ability. But at the same time, unless we expect the United States to spiral down into multi-years of recession and so forth and so on, if the U.S. economy continues to grow, even at a moderate pace, then our market will still be one of the most attractive markets to do business with in the world. So we would have to see some sort of terrible economic decline as a result of America First. And so far, nothing that I've seen indicates that that's going to happen.
Not even 2008, 2009 financial.
The financial crisis then, that happened, but that had very, very little to do with what we're talking about now. That was basically speculation in the U.S. real estate market. It had nothing to do with what we were doing with people overseas. So, and the thing is that I think as time goes by, that the United States is changing, and the things that are happening today, and rapidly happening, are we've talked about these things. They're part of the fourth turning, and this will, over the years, continue to happen and solidify and create new institutions in America. And for example, the column I wrote before I left, at least part 1, on America's brand of economy, okay, which is some form of state capitalism. I see that extending, expanding, and it will be part of a future, an artificial intelligence future, by the way, in which the government takes a larger and larger role in the economy. And I can actually foresee, and by the way, from that point of view, I see those large companies that are becoming an increasing share of the US stock market. The Googles, the Microsofts, the Metas, the Nvidias, that whole group, let's say there's 10 of them, I see those companies, these mega companies, growing even larger. And one of the reasons I think that we will continue to edge towards state capitalism is as these companies become even bigger and more powerful on a global basis, there needs to be some sort of counterweight to their power and size. And what could possibly be a counterweight except for the government? So one of the reasons I'm seeing that state capitalism is going to continue and larger is because there needs to be some kind of counterweight, and government is the only thing I can think of that could possibly counterweight like 10 companies that already are worth more than half the countries in the world.
Well, that goes to the question, what does state capitalism really mean? And of course, I'm going to ask the second one too. For years now, the world has seen an international global economy. And how can it possibly be demolished and return to what? Those two questions seem for me to go together.
They do, because return to what is a good question.
Yeah.
We can't go backwards. We all know that, okay? The period of time in the United States in which we had small companies that provided the backbone to this country's growth, those are gone. Those are gone. And the reason it's gone is because overseas, other countries didn't stay backward either. They grew too. And as they grew, their companies grew, and our companies grew in competition with them. That's one of the reasons that there is a Google, okay, or a Apple, is as their countries grew and their companies grew, we responded, they responded, we responded, up and up and up. Now, saying that, unlike our country, many of these countries, their governments aided and abetted their companies to grow larger. Now, we prided ourselves on the free markets and capitalism, which, by the way, I don't believe we have had free markets in a long, long time, okay? And capitalism has been state capitalism for many years because it didn't just begin in this administration that we started to invest in companies and so forth. One of the reasons, for example, that we have such a robust energy department. Remember back in the 70s, those of you do, that when OPEC and OPEC Plus basically had us in a stranglehold and could raise their energy prices. And so, well, after that, our government said, here's an example. The global threat of OPEC had to be answered. So the United States government, in conjunction with some of the largest oil companies in the United States, came to develop fracking, okay, and develop our own energy resources. And the government put an enormous amount of money behind that through these companies like Exxon and Chevron and so forth. And look what happened. That was state capitalism. I mean, I think Obama was the one that turned that tide, a Democrat and a liberal. Okay, so I could go through many, many, many examples in our history where our government interfered, assisted, directed, guided our economy.
So, as one of the people who fought fracking and the fossil fuel companies, knowing in the 70s the damage fossil fuels did to health and the well-being of Americans.
Yep.
That you're talking 50, going on 60 years. And,
Yes.
and this fight right now to stop really solar and wind energy, although coming up from the bottom, what I think 40% of our economy now is solar and wind energy.
I
So
think-
there's a non-stop. You can't stop what might.
But you can, but
You can crush it. You could
you-
try to crush it.
You can say that this administration is slowing down, discontinuing things like solar or wind,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they are expanding and exploiting, and as much as they ever did in the energy department, nuclear energy,
Yeah.
which is cleaner than both solar and wind.
But there's no way to get rid of the rain, the rods.
The rods, okay.
There's no way to dispose of them.
Well,
So
they already
they're-
have. Okay, they're buried underground. But the point is that here's state capitalism once again, and industry backs it because nuclear is the way to go. That is your most efficient, your quickest, your cheapest energy source versus solar or wind. So the country, state capitalism plus basically artificial intelligence, the whole artificial intelligence industry, okay, is promoting nuclear energy. And this is the growth sector of the economy. Not only that, but the energy source after nuclear that is the most attractive is natural gas, which goes back to
Methane is worse than
exactly,
carbon.
exactly.
You're using the term state as the government is a state, or you're not
State.
talking about each state.
I'm saying
you're
the
using
federal
that-
government.
Yeah,
Okay, the
okay.
federal government is becoming more and more involved in directing the economy, and just since I've written that, I have. By the way, tune in this week because I'm going to write part 2 of the state capitalism, what the impact is, the downside of state capitalism, and so forth. But just since I have been gone, for example, I had enumerated a number of things that were going on in the country right now, which sort of were examples of modern state capitalism, like President Trump had brought into the White House the chairman and CEO of Intel, semiconductor company, and said basically that he should be fired. Well, that worked because the next thing we know is that the United States government took a 10% position in Intel. Okay, and here I'll follow this through. Intel has been a large company in the United States, but not very profitable, very slow, keep making mistakes. Suddenly, 10% ownership in the United States government, the stock popped from $19 or $20 up to 23 or 24, and then kind of fallen back. Okay, but that's not the end of the story, because lo and behold, last week, a friend and an associate of the White House who runs Oracle then decided, and I'm quite sure with the urgings of the new shareholder, the United States government, to do a deal with Intel. And then NVIDIA did it. Okay? Both of those companies are having close ties with the White House. The stock, the last I looked, was in the 30s. So who benefited? Intel benefited. The government has benefited. The companies that invested in it benefited. And you, if you have shareholdings in the company, you benefited. So there's just an example of state capital. Another one I'll give you. They, as you know, U.S. Steel was supposed to be purchased by Nippon Steel of Japan. That was held up. The White House talked to Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel, and basically agreed to the deal that Nippon could buy them. But they gave the United States government a golden share in this, in U.S. Steel. Okay, U.S. Steel is saved or whatever, they're fine, everything's fine, stock didn't do much, Nippon Steel is buying it, okay. And then the next thing you know is that U.S. Steel decides that they want to close one of their steel manufacturing units in Illinois. And so it was planned to be closed. End of story. It's what, it just wasn't productive. It wasn't profitable. They're kind of consolidating in some regions, expanding in another. Next thing you know, guess who's knocking on their door? The administration. You're not closing it. It's staying open. So there you have both the upside and the downside for a company
Yin and yang.
in state capitalism. Okay, and I could keep going. Today, the country is in an uproar. The companies are, because of what is it called? H-1B visas.
Yes.
Okay, what is that? It's a visa that was created when there are companies that need specialized expertise and can't find it after, searching resumes and, want ads and everything else. There's nobody that's qualified to fit the bill.
And it also brought doctors to this country.
That's an example.
Health centers.
That's an
That's
example.
where I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what the government has decided suddenly that they were going to charge $100,000 up from $2,000 for the issuance of one of these visas. Okay, now what's the result of that? The result is that it's suddenly become much costlier to hire someone outside of this country to do a job that can't be filled in the United States. Okay, what does that do? Well, you might argue, and the administration is arguing, that is all bull, okay? That companies have used the H-1B visa in a way that not to just fill a specialized job, okay, but to just get more people, that if they need IT people cheaper, they could get them overseas and bring them in with the visa. Okay, that's the counter argument. No, you're not using it for what the law tells me to use it. Who knows? I don't know. There's probably truth in both sides. What could that do? Well, it could make going to other countries for very smart, skilled doctors, for example, not the United States. Because this way they don't have to, other countries are cheaper to work in because they don't charge $100,000 for a visa. Follow me?
Yeah.
So that is one area that could happen. Who knows? It's going to have to work its way out. But it's just another instance where the government has leaned even further into state capitalism. And I could keep going. It's a constant number of changes that are occurring almost on a weekly basis in this area.
And then the question is, will people want to come here with what's happening with immigration and everyday Americans because of ICE and this and those? I'm going to really look forward to part 2 of your column.
Well, there are some downsides. Okay, I mean, this isn't the first time. Okay, that as I said, that state capitalism has occurred in the United States, and in the past, as the country, and it's tick-tock, it goes back and forth. Okay. So in the past, for example, state capitalism has squashed a lot of entrepreneurism and creativity and exchanged it for cronyism.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no surprise that, is there any surprise that the president's buddy that runs Oracle is suddenly getting the job, to invest in Intel or into this or that? Okay. So there's that risk of cronyism involved. It's also, the risk is that and China is a great example of this, state capitalism is such that when the government gets involved and makes the decisions, normally growth slows because the government really doesn't know all that much about business. And so they make investment choices that are not necessarily good for growth.
And I'm watching those too. And
Yes.
of course, for me, it's nuclear plants and it's
Right.
fossil fuels going back and not caring. So that leads me to our last question: where does equity and equality for American citizens lie? And do we have any say at all or stake in the financial world from what is occurring globally? Obviously, the political alliances that are occurring with China, North Korea, Russia, and India are extremely significant and ominous
Well,
to me.
as I said, it's a different world today. I see in the future increased involvement worldwide in every country's economy by the governments. What is happening in the United States is happening all over the world. And it's going to create more competition, more trade barriers, slower growth in some ways. But that is seemingly what the new generations, the generations of Americans, the generations of Brazilians, the Chinese, the Japanese generations are okay with. They're okay with that as long as income inequality is reduced. And if their economies can't produce a reduction in income inequality, and ours has not, it's expanded it, once again, they'll look to the only entity outside of the economy strong enough, big enough, more powerful enough to compete against corporations in the economy. The corporations have failed miserably in creating income equality. And so the younger generations today are looking for government to do that. Some will, some won't. Jury is out. And combining that with the advent of artificial intelligence, which is rapidly entering the economic workforce, that is both, could be a blessing or a curse, depending upon how it occurs.
And it needs to be strictly regulated.
Well, here's what you...
Okay, by the government.
There you are, right there. What did you just say? It needs to be, who's going to regulate it? The U.S. government.
There we go.
The same thing is occurring in Japan, in China. Who's going to help? Who's going to do that? Welcome to state capitalism.
Okay. And everybody needs to be paying attention.
Yes.
And thank you, Bill, so much.
You're welcome. And remember, if you have any questions whatsoever, send them to us at daltonctv@gmail.com.